Just like wave your pinky when you're ready. Hey everybody, we're here at Brand Innovators at South by Southwest, and I was just listening to John Starkweather talk about a whole panel about inclusion and what AT&T is doing to empower their employees and their company and even their customers to understand that inclusion is really important to them. And I had a question for him, and I'm going to ask him it now, and I just really love to hear the answer, and I think it's something we should all be listening to because it's so important for so many companies. So John, I love this conversation about this, and I know you've heard me talk in the past about how in so many brainstorming sessions, there's no brains actually storming. And the reason is not that there aren't smart people, but employees don't feel empowered to really speak. They're kind of led by their leaders or their direct reports on what they want to talk about. Maybe they're given some bullet points before a session on brainstorming, and then it ends up becoming just a very small conversation. And I was thinking when you were up there talking about this inclusion topic is AT&T seems to be really concerned and doing some great things, but how do you empower those employees to actually raise their hand? And I'm not talking about complaining here, I'm talking about the ideas of this is what we could do better, or yes, you think you're including us, but we're your customer, meaning you're like when you're selling to somebody, you want to know what the customer thinks. We're the people that need to be included. How are you making me feel good about being a part of that conversation?
Yeah, too many brainstorms are people positioning their ideas
100%.
to the highest paid person in the room.
Right.
Very rarely do you have an equal playing field or a safe zone where you can really bring different ideas.
Exactly. So how does that relate to what you guys are trying to do with inclusion? How do you overcome that obstacle with the inclusion topic?
So including all of those voices, not just having the faces in the room that check a box and say, look, we've hired this amazing diverse team, requires rethinking and changing the rules of how you engage in any environment, whether it's brainstorming, whether it's a one-on-one session,
or whether it's
let
a
alone
sales
team
call.
or a sales call. You have to very intentionally give people meaningful roles and different people in the seat of presenting something in a sales call or answering questions.
So in other words, it goes beyond, so again, in your talk up here, you made a great point about listening. And you know I talk about that all the time. Like if you're not listening, you don't really know what people want or what their needs are. How do you relate that into this inclusion conversation?
So one thing that has developed in my team throughout the pandemic has been turning over our meetings to a single individual on the team to lead a topic that no one else has seen or pre-approved.
So somebody who's not normally leading those meetings.
That's right.
Oh,
normally, like in my team meetings, I'm the highest paid person in the room. Everybody works for me. It's my little fiefdom if I wanted it to be that way. But I'm sitting there looking at the Brady Bunch squares, and I'm very aware that people aren't engaging on something.
So you're becoming a participant in the conversation instead of a leader of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have learned amazing things about each other. I've found talent that I didn't know existed that have changed the dynamic in my team. I could hold a brainstorming session with my current leadership, and I think that any idea would be welcome because of what we've done on a regular basis. But having worked at different companies in different countries, I also recognize that just because I think that the ideas would come does not make that reality.
Right.
My most significant learning experience on this was in my last company. We're sitting in Taiwan where I've got most of my staff is Chinese. And in that culture, the most senior person makes the decisions. Everybody just supports. They stay silent. They will not interact and come up with ideas, even though they've got solutions to share. And that was one, especially as I started bringing more Europeans and North Americans into the mix. It was easy to listen to the British voices, the American voices that would take up more than their fair share of air. So what I literally had to do is allow that to happen and then pause and be like, enough of your voices, and turn to my Taiwanese team and like, what do you think? And it could have been, in some cases, these were big, long, hour-long debates. And the people that had been listening through all of that we're the smartest people in the room every time.
So you've taken this learning into what you're doing with your teams here now,
Absolutely.
as far as inclusion goes. And then I'm curious what you do. So, we've both been in sales a lot. We know how you finish something, you follow up, you want to let that customer know that you heard what they said, what their concerns were. I heard this, we want to address this. Do you do that with the teams here too? Do you, like, when someone comes up with an idea, do you follow up after and say, really love that idea, let's see what we can do for next steps? Or do you just leave that for them to follow up with you?
No, I think you have to turn that corner and bring it back.
Right.
Because if you acknowledge it and you discuss it and there's no clear action, especially as the most senior person in that chain,
right,
you don't give them permission to follow through. You're the stat that I shared about was 87% of Hispanics in the country at big corporations know they're at a company that talks about DE&I, but only 50% have seen any change. And there's stats in there about them fearing to be themselves, talk versus action. So circling back and saying, Andriana, Esmeralda, love that discussion. Can you come back and formalize the things we've talked about? Let's really seriously consider that idea. That without that, you're talking and not giving permission fully to.
It sounds to me, so I like to say that a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power. Networks connect, communities care. And it sounds to me that what you're doing, and I've been talking about this to a lot of companies, is start thinking about how do you build employee community? Because when you have a community, there's inclusion. Because people feel that you're a part of their neighborhood and you're a part of what they're doing, and that they're. So it sounds to me like AT&T is, or at least you are, because we talked about this earlier too, how individual leaders are so important to companies, not just what the company's stake is. So I really appreciate you sharing this with me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always great to see you,
always a
buddy.
pleasure, man.
Do you want an outro as well?
No, I think that I don't need the outro.